Hey programmers, so the idea behind Access Modifier. Whenever we are working with any project or designing our application, there is always one doubt in our mind that why not to make everything public? Because if I make something public, that gives me more freedom. I can use it wherever I need and I don't need to make every time that change from private to public or protected to public. Right? What's so big deal? So we are going to deep dive into that, why there is so much doubt in our mind, what is the actual logic behind these access modifiers. One thing, we are not going to talk about all those definitions that are already there on the internet. So let's go ahead and deep dive into the code. So here we are at the Visual Studio and we are going to use two different applications. One is this that you see code with Praveen Yadav, and the second application this .NET Code Talk, right? Why we need these two to understand the concept. So I will talk a little later. Okay, so we will start with very basic. So let's start with access modifiers. What is access modifier? Did you ever thought why we are calling it access modifiers? So go on name. Access and modifier split these two words. Access means that do you have access or not. Next is modifier. Do you have access to modify your this class or not, or this object or not. That is why it is called access modifier. So that is first thing. Now why we need access modifier? That is second thing. There is a concept of called encapsulation in the object-oriented programming in OOPS. To fulfill that OOPS concept, to fulfill that encapsulation, these access modifiers were introduced by the designer of languages. They have introduced public, private, protected, and others that we are going to talk. So these gives level of restriction, and that is what encapsulation is. The level of restrictions you add on your class. So these will help us to put the level of restrictions. So let's talk about the very first access modifier, that is called public. Right? Now, whenever you are going to create a class, you know what? In the C# I'm talking. So if you try to make some class private, right? Let's try to make this class private. So we have this class called employee, and let's try to make a class private. The first question is, this C# compiler is going to understand that or not. So let's make it private and let's see if it works or not. So I clearly see there is a red error message, and it says that elements defined in the namespace cannot be explicitly declared private, protected internal, or private protected, right? So that clearly says you can't make your class private. Now big question is why, right? So if you will make your class private, what's the use of that? Can you create object of private classes? The answer is no, right? Private classes can't be used for inheritance, can't be used for object also. So let's go ahead. So we talked about that we will talk about public, but we went into private. But I thought this is more important before we talk about public, that if I try to make class private, is C# is going to allow us or not, right? So what I will do, let's create another class, right? So I won't put any access modifier here, and if I try to let's say employee1, this is employee1 class. And now let's try to use inheritance first. Let's see inheritance is allowed or not. So you see, oh, it is not even able to recognize it. Oh, here you say the error message says employee is inaccessible due to its protection level. That means this protection level, right? This access modifiers. Now can I create an object of this or not? So let's go ahead and let's try to create an object. So I will say, hey, employee equal to new, and yeah, here you go, employee1, right? Not employee1, dude, employee actually, right? Let's remove this service also. Okay, so you see I'm not able to create even object. Again the same message, inaccessible due to its protection level. Now what is this, right? What is private? So let's start with private. Let's talk about public after this. Okay, so that means when you made something private, there is a lock that you put on your class that no one is going to use it, right? No one has access of it. So now why we need it, right? So even you really don't need to make anything private, like class level, the first class level private, right? Because this is one thing. Now we have just understood that it doesn't support inheritance, it doesn't allow to create object. But even if compiler don't allow us, if I rebuild it, so it will fail, right, with the same error message, here you go, right? So that means you can't do that. Now private we understand. Now let's go on public. So public is something that when you make something public, that is like this class is open for everything, right? Whosoever can come to this class and they can do whatever they want because they have whole access to this class, right? So let's do that. So what I will do, I will make this public. Now this code, first of all, see, compiler is happy now. Now there is no red error message. So now if I go ahead and try to create object, you see, yay, go. So this is happy, right? For sure I forgot to add semicolon, so it is happy. Now if I try to even do the inheritance, it will be happy. Here you go. You see, dude, it is happy. Now other thing, this public, there are two things about public. When you make something public, it is allowed to use within this project. So when I say project, let's see where this class is right now. So this class is inside this solution, this class library called code with Praveen Yadav, right? But there is another class library called test class lib. Now since this was public, right, this employee class was public, over here let's say there is another class in the different project test class library. Can I use it or not, right? So let's try to do that. What I will do, I will just copy this code. I will try to create object over there, right? So let's see, we don't have the namespace. Let's add namespace first. Okay, you see, we are able to access it. Public gives that freedom to use inside the project or outside of your project wherever it is being referenced, because in the test class library, here we are referring that project code with Praveen Yadav. That is why we are able to access it there as well. Now, interesting thing, that is public. We understand public, we understand private, right? Now there is something called internal. Now there is a situation that you wanted to make your class only available within your project. When I say within your project, if you are working with this project, right, you wanted to available that class only within this project. What you will do, there is something called internal. So if I make it internal, let's make it internal, and now let's see, is it going to allow us to use out of this project or not? So let's go to the car class, which was in the test class library, right? Over here, test class library, this, you see, it started shouting that employee is inaccessible due to its protection level. So first thing, it is able to recognize that there is something called employee. But why it is able to recognize? Because there is a namespace, it understands, because we are referring this, right, code with Praveen Yadav namespace, this project from here. That is why it is able to understand, but it is saying I can't allow you because this man, this employee man, has put a lock on their class, something called internal, that only the internal members, internal classes can use it, right? Like this. This is internal class employee one, it is able to use it. Okay, so now why we need to make something internal, I'm going to talk about that, but that is not a time to talk right now. Let's understand concept of next access modifier. So the next access modifier is protected, right? So let's go ahead and make it protected now. So what I have to do I'm doing something wrong. For sure the spells are wrong, but you can't make it protected, right? Only two access modifiers are allowed on the class level. One is either public, right, that we already know, we tried. Second is internal, that is also we tried, right? And other than that, it is not allowing anything. Let's go ahead for protected. For sure I can't make my class protected, but what I can do else? So I can create other members, right, other variables, those things I can make protected. For example, if I create one void method and I say this is my test method, right? So if I make this, here you go, and let's make it protected. So I can make my inner. So inside my class, I can make either protected, I can make whatever, public, private, and whatever, right? So let's focus on protected. Now, what is the use of protected? So, protected says this method is specifically designed to fulfill the inheritance, and this is protected from object creation, right? So go on name. So what I'm doing here, this method is only needs to be used by inheritance when I say protected, but I'm protecting this method for object creation. Now let's go ahead. So now this method is protected. Now what we will do, let's create one method over here as well. So what I will do, this method is test1 instead of, let's remove the protected here, and let's say this method is test1, right? And this object creation, let's go here inside the class or inside the method, right? So here you go. Now try to access, since this is protected, so what we are saying, this method is protected to access from object, right? But yes, protected means that you can still use through inheritance, right? That is why there is a protected. Okay, now let's try to use it. So what I will say, hey, employee dot test. Oh, you go. So here you see, I'm not even able to see that test here, and what it says, cannot access protected. Here you see, right? So it is clearly saying that you can't use any method which is protected from protected access modifier, right? Okay, now can I still use it, right? So yes, you can still use it. What all you have to do, you can use it through that method, because it is inheritance, so you can for sure use it without any object, right? So this is the use of protected. Okay, so these were the 4 basic access modifier. Now what C# has done, they have introduced 2 more access modifier. One is called private protected. So let's create private protected now. Here you go. So this this is one access modifier. Don't treat this as a 2 access modifier. But to understand the concept, how I will remember that private protected. So what all you have to do, first private, right? The first access modifier, first keyword, understand that this is only for external project. Whenever you have to use this application, how this method is going to behave over there. So I'm saying this is private. That means within this application, everyone can use it through inheritance, right? Because it is protected. But I'm saying for the external, it is not allowed. Now let me prove that. So I have other class external, right? So what I will do here, in the external class, let's try to let's first make it public, right? Otherwise I won't be able to use it outside the project. So it is public now. So let's remove this, not remove, let's comment this, because okay, so here you go. So let's inherit this, right? Because this is protected, for sure it has to be accessed through the inheritance. So let's inherit it here. So Control V, here you go. Now here you can see within the project, right? Within this project, Code with Praveen Yadav, here we are using inheritance, and you see I'm able to access it. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the same thing over there, right? So let's just copy this method and put it here. Here you go. So let's make it test2 method, and you see it says is inaccessible due to its protection level. So remember 2 things, first access modifier is for out of this project, right? Out of this project. And second, this would be out within this project, right? So within this project. So this is how we can remember. Now you can still play with you can make protected first and you can make private last, but the concepts would be same. But I would recommend don't use protected private, otherwise you will get confused, right? Go with the Microsoft documentation. They are saying it is private protected, right? And it is easy to remember that first thing is for external project, second is for internal project. So this is fine. Now we understand private protected. I am repeating one more time. So private out of this project, protected within this project, because it is first, that is why out of this project. It is second, that is why it is internal project, right? Let's focus on the other one. Now what is else? The second is the last access modifier that C# have, that is protected internal. Here you go. What it says again, out of this project. how this method is going to be behave, that it is only accessible through inheritance because it is protected. If I can show you here, so you see I am able to access. What if I try to access this through object? Let's uncomment this code and I should see same error, that is called inaccessible, right? So you see cannot access protected member. Perfect. Now we understand. Now since this is internal, that means within this project this method is going to be used. Now you can access this through a object as well, right? Because this is internal as well, right? So here you go, you see I'm able to access through object within this project. But there is now one more thing. Since this was protected as well, right, there is a one benefit. When you make something protected internal, now you're free to use it either as a inheritance. Here you go, you see we are using it as an inheritance and as an object as well, right? Through object as well within the same project. So that is the benefit of protected internal. Now the big question is, why not to make everything public, right? So now let's come to that use case. Let me show you why not to make everything public, why this is so important. Okay, so what I will do here we have employee class, right? So we will create one public method. Let's say this is my public method, and I will say, hey, this return string, okay, and let's say any example, right, is valid or not, right? So let's say this is returning valid, right? Now there you have some added logic, right? You have added some logic and you are returning at the end like in format of a string, right? You are saying this is true, right? If it is returning true, then it is valid, otherwise false. And now this method you made it for your internal purpose only, right? So let's say there is a condition that you are checking, hey, if it is valid, right, and the condition is true, then I'm performing this logic. Perfect. Now this was public. Let's try to rebuild it. Okay, so rebuild it. Now here you go, we have to use what it says. Oh, we messed up, so we don't need this logic now. We understand this concept. Let's comment it. Let's rebuild one more time. So here you go. Okay, now here the birth of second project. Let's imagine you are writing one class library, you are writing one library, dotnet library, right? And here you have introduced some logic which is testing something, and this logic, this method is dependent on this, is valid. Now what happened, someone is using your class library, right? So in the project .NET Core library. So what here, if I can show you, there is 2 more people that is working on the other project, which is this project. Here you go, you see we are using that assembly, that DLs here, code with Praveen Yadav. So what we will do, let's we have already done rebuild, so let's go to the solution explorer, folder explorer actually, and copy the DLL. I think this DLL, right? So and this DLL we need to add in the other project. So here we have going to replace with the new logic, right? Okay, now this project is using this method, right, is valid. So since this was public for sure, and they have access to this class public and this method as well, they are free to use it, right? So let's say they were working on their some project and they have also added similar logic. Let's create an object over here. So what we will do, let's add a reference here using code with Praveen Yadav, and here you go, equal to new, and here you go, right? So this employee. Now just copy this and try to access through the object. So here you go, is valid. So I'm using is valid because it was publicly available, and now let's say I've added some logic here, right? So I can do anything whatever I want because this is public. Perfect. Let's say, so I'm saying if it is returning true, the same logic, let's say same logic, right? So let's say there was some logic of true and false, and I'm doing my on operation here, right? Okay, now this is good. Now what happened, since this was public, and but the idea of your that I can make everything public, what's so big deal? If I want to use it, I can use it. If I don't want to use it, I will keep it there. Now here that idea will fail. Why I'm saying that? Because let's say this method was returning some logic in the form of string. Now you realize, hey man, there is something wrong. The method is valid, but the return type was string. This is so wrong. I have done something wrong. Let's change this logic. So what I will do now, I will start returning a true here, right? And I will return the type of bool, right? So now this is fine. And since this was your internal logic, sure, you can use it. So what you will do, instead of checking that, you will check here. So let's say you have made that logic update as well in your project. Now when the other person update your library in their project, so what will happen in that case? So let's go ahead and try to do the same thing. First of all, let's build this logic. So in the code with here, so let's build, let's generate the new DLL files. So let's see what happened now. Now go to the same thing here, copy the DLL and update the DLLs in the other person project. Okay, replace it. Here you go. Okay, now they have the latest code. You see what we did with the other person, dude, because you made that public and you wanted to use that method internally, but other people was thinking that this is public, so we are good to go. You break their project. You see, now if they don't update their logic, their application is going to crash every time. So that is why these things are very important, that the level of access you do. If you are designing something for your own within your project, don't make it public, make it internal, right? Or some other access modifiers. But if you make something public, you have to be very careful that this logic really you wanted to expose outside of the project or not. Okay, one more thing, that C# support private classes or not. We saw that if I have shown you that you can't create a private class, we can't create private classes, right? But does really C# support that or not? Yes, the answer is C# support the private classes. But where? We just saw. Okay, so what C# says, you are not allowed to use class private because there is no use. There is like a garbage class if you make something private, but still within this class, that means within this class you can still create a class. Let's say class so let's say class, right? Other class, first class, first, right? And you can make your nested classes as private. You see, it is happy, right? So if there is a situation where put a bunch of code within the nested class, over there C# is allowing that, right? So if someone says that C# don't allow private classes, that answer is partially true, partially false. It is yes, it is not allowing, and yes, it is allowing. So now you know where it allows and where it not. These are the ideas behind your access modifier. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.